Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in our webinar today. We're going to be talking about 10 design ideas for L&D chatbots, or chatbots to support learners in an organization. There is going to be a recording of today's webinar. You'll all get a link. The goal is today in your inbox that you can share, review, share with people. There's been a bunch of people who've emailed me that we're not able to make this time, so they're looking forward to the recording. So with that said, we're encouraging everybody that is participating to be interactive. If you've got questions, comments, ideas, please include them in the chat, and we'll talk about them, and that will enrich the experience for all those that might be watching later on. By way of introduction, for any of you that don't know me, my name is Vince Hahn. I'm the founder and CEO of Mobile Coach. I've been working with chatbots for the last 7 years. Located in Provo, Utah, where fall is upon us, and it's beautiful here right now. I'd like to introduce a couple of my chatbot colleagues that I've invited as panelists today. Paul Bills, who's the director of chatbot design at Mobile Coach. He's at least on my screen, he's at the bottom of the panelists' screen. Hi, Paul. And Corey Richards, who was a senior chatbot designer. She's had 4 or 5 years of chatbot design and now leads our partnership program. So I've invited them to help me and keep me honest as we go through today's webinar. So we will be monitoring the chat. So if you have got questions or technical problems or comments, please do put them in the chat today. So let's get started. So to get started, I want to talk a little bit about the different chatbot modes that there are, just to level set and get on the same page before we get into the design ideas. So there are several different types of chatbot modes. Most consumers, and let me back up, and most of you that are watching this and participating today work in supporting learning programs within your organizations. And a lot of what you have to do to get a chatbot up and running is educating. Chatbots are still a relatively new technology, and so you'll find yourself telling people what chatbots are about. And so a lot of what I hope to accomplish today is to give you some good ammunition, some easy talking points to share the virtues of a chatbot to support learning. So that starts right now, where a lot of consumers have had an experience interacting with chatbots on a public website. And really, the value proposition of a lot of these chatbots is really to answer basic FAQs. So this is typically a web widget, so you go to a website like Expedia.com, and there's a little icon on the bottom right. You can click on that, and boom, the chatbot pops open. The next mode is having a chatbot on a web portal or on a persistent desktop platform. This is very similar in terms of functionality to the first, where it is a chat window that pops open on your computer. And the difference, though, is that because it's a web portal, it can know who you are. So in this first example, everyone's an anonymous user. So the chatbot's going to say the same thing to everybody, like, welcome to our website. Here are 5 things you can do. Over here, you can have a chatbot be more user-specific. So it could pop up and say, welcome back, Vince. Here are 5 things for you. And so even though it will look and act the same, it's functionally very different because it's a portal. And then the third mode here is having a chatbot on a common mobile messaging platform. Common mobile messaging platforms include SMS, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Line. There's all sorts of messaging across, messaging apps across the world. And the biggest difference here is that now, if I've got a presence on my phone, the chatbot can proactively reach me at any time. I don't have to be on the web portal. I don't have to be on the website to interact with the chatbot. So those are the 3 different modes. I'm going to now ask you, I'm going to launch a poll. So all of you now should have a poll up. And if you could quickly just answer this poll, which chatbot mode are you most interested in for your organization? Public website, sort of addressing an anonymous user base, web portal, or workplace collaboration platform. I should mention that that second one would include things like Microsoft Teams or Slack or WebEx Teams even, where it's just a persistent portal. And then the last one's a mobile messaging platform. So everyone just take a second and answer the poll. Give everyone just, we have 73% of you that have answered the poll. We'll just give it another moment here. Then I'll release the poll results. There's nothing like trying to run a webinar and looking at all the different things you're supposed to do. You have to be on your A game to do it correctly. All right, so I'm going to end the poll now. 3, 2, 1. Great, 83% participated, and I'm clicking on share results. Give me a thumbs up if you can see the results, panelists. Thank you. That's really interesting. Where 61% of you said you're most interested in that second mode. This, for us at Mobile Coach, we're seeing this as a trend as well, particularly since we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and the adoption of workplace collaboration platforms has really accelerated. I would say that most organizations had a workplace collaboration platform, but since COVID, we're seeing a lot of organizations focus on actually having it be much more functional. Maybe that's true for you too. If so, put in the chat. In fact, if you could put in the chat what workplace collaboration platform your company uses, Slack, Microsoft Teams, Yammer, whatever it might be, I'd love to see what your organization uses. So great, that helps us understand, helps me understand the audience here, and we can focus a little bit about those particular modalities when we go through the top 10 design ideas. So the other idea I want to create a lot of Microsoft Teams. There's a WebEx team, some Slack. Thank you for all participating in the chat. One other idea before we get to the design ideas, and this is a relatively new idea that I'm trying to help people working with chatbots really understand. And in fact, I just published I'm going to make 2 plugs today. This is the first plug. I've just started a chatbot series, a video series on my LinkedIn page. If we're not connected on LinkedIn, please go find me on LinkedIn. Just Vince Hahn, one word, linkedin.com, Vince Hahn. Search for me and please do a connection and you can see these videos. But today's video that I just published this morning on LinkedIn talks about these 2 modalities. So that's my first plug. Another one coming later. Is the modality of push versus pull. So this is typically terms used for marketing, where marketing campaigns can either push by proactively sending prospect stuff, and pull means prospects are actually asking and requesting for the content. So this applies very well to chatbots. You can have a chatbot programmatically push content, or you could have a chatbot be passive and be waiting for learners to ask it for content, and they're in control and they're pulling the content. So all chatbots can have push and pull modalities, but I have a little Venn diagram here where not all modalities lend themselves to pull, or to push, I should say. So for example, in the modalities we talked about earlier, if I'm on a public website like Expedia and that chatbot's open, as soon as I leave that website, I no longer have access to that chatbot. So if that chatbot wanted to proactively ping me 3 hours after I visited the website, I really can't do that because I'm now not on the chatbot. And so having a chatbot on a modality where you have a persistent connection with the learner enables you to have the push functionality. So things like SMS, things like WhatsApp, things like Microsoft Teams installed on my phone, where I can receive a message. That's going to be a huge consideration when you're designing your chatbot. Now, any chatbot that can push me a message can also enable pull. I can ask a question back. And so let's kind of look at the different use cases within learning. So these are some of the most common use cases I'm seeing for chatbots in learning. So under push, if you're creating a chatbot to replace like an e-learning course, or to accentuate a spaced learning program, and so you're asking the chatbot to deliver training, then you absolutely need push to be able to do that. If you're wanting a chatbot for performance support or learner support or moment of need support, like, hey, I need this job aid right now, then yeah, you could have, that's a pull modality, and that can be on lots of channels. I could know that, hey, I need to go to my LMS and ask the chatbot there, or if I have it on my phone, I can just ask the chatbot on my phone. And then these middle use cases, training reinforcement, onboarding, safety and compliance, sales enablement, can be a blend of both. You can imagine a training reinforcement or a training sustainment, a sustaining use case where a chatbot is giving reminders and nudges over time for a couple months, but also inviting the learner to say, hey, if you ever need a refresher or you need a reminder of things, just text me, the chatbot speaking. And so it can be both push and pull. This is really important, a really important design consideration when you're thinking about a chatbot, to know what modality your chatbot is going to be in, what bucket it's going to be in. So as you go in to design it, you can sort of figure out what the best practices are for each modality. So if those of you that are on the chat, go ahead and put in the chat, are you more interested in push or in pull or in both? I'd be really interested to see. I will say, at the risk of giving some bias in your answers, since COVID, we're seeing a lot more energy towards pull. In the past, we really did almost exclusively push, but we're seeing a lot of pull-based use cases because of performance support, learner support, moment of need. So, and that seems consistent with what everyone's saying in the chat, both. Yeah, if you can do both, why not? Alberic, I like that. Pull with a little bit of push. That's great. Awesome. Thank you for your comments. Really, really interesting and informative. So let's go into our top, or I keep saying, these are 10 design ideas. Whether they're the top 10 design ideas, that'll be up to you. But these are 10 design ideas. Some of you may have heard me speak about chatbot design ideas in the past. These are 10 completely new design ideas, really based on the experience that I've seen with all the projects we have going on here at Mobile Coach over the last year. So hopefully these will be new and fresh to you, but most importantly, I hope they're going to be helpful. And again, here I'm going to invite Corey or Paul to chime in on any of these with anecdotes, stories, ideas, and things like that. So let's get started. So the first idea I want to share is channel selection is a balance between access and policy, and it's worth fighting for learner access. So let me try to describe this in a, what is this called? This is called an image. This is a seesaw image, and it's a balance between easy access for users and whatever corporate security and privacy policies that you're subject to in your company. So let me give you a concrete example. I have had a lot of cases where I'm consulting with someone that's trying to create a chatbot, and they say, we really need to get access to our learner, and the best way to do that is through their mobile device. Everyone's attached to their mobile device in our company, and for those in the North America anyway, everybody is on SMS. I know if I can get a chatbot on SMS, we can get learner access. So that's the ideal channel for them for easy access to the learner base. However, when they go and start to create their chatbot and they go and get all the necessary approvals, IT will come back and say, you can't use SMS for security reasons. It violates our security policy. Now, we are seeing that can change over time as people start developing, companies start to mature their mobile device policies. But a lot of times it's because it's brand new. And so when something's brand new and your corporate security and privacy staff's going to, fair enough, they're going to be more conservative in their approach. They're going to try to, limit the sort of newness of a modality. But really, my experience is that you really only have this one chance to fight for the best access point for your learners. And so it's worth putting in the time and the effort to find the modality that works best for your learners, that also, of course, you can get approval for. With COVID, that's helped because Microsoft Teams and Slack, they now have mobile-based modalities, and IT departments have had to accelerate approval for those. So that's really helpful and can check the box for a lot of you. But still, if there's some debate around, hey, we would love to use SMS because we know that would drive the best business result, but we can't get security and privacy on board, it's worth going through the time to just be as thorough as you can to make the argument that you can. So that's the design tip number one. Comments on that from either you, Paul, or Corey, before we move on?
Yeah, I would just add that it's worth sometimes sacrificing features for access. So there are some times where you want to really personalize and contextualize your bot, and it might be much more effective if it can reach more people. If to comply with security and privacy, you need to remove some personalization. So for instance, if you want to include people's names or capture people's names, and that's the reason your security and privacy team are worried, it might almost probably will be worth it to remove that personalization for the sake of access. So when we say, fight for access to users, this is usually a very high priority for us, and we will, we'll change the design, we'll rework things if it opens up that access for people. Because access, obviously, if you don't have access, the bot isn't even going to give you a chance to work. So that access is really important.
I'll also add, there are a lot of chatbot channels that you can use to gain access to users, but we've definitely found that if someone isn't already using a channel or isn't comfortable with a channel, they're not likely to get the same benefits as if they were using a channel. Like if they're using SMS every day, that's where you want to be reaching them. So sometimes the problem is things like SMS aren't as secure, they're not encrypted end to end. So that's where a security team might have some problems. But really finding the right channel and advocating for that can leaps and bounds help make sure that you're delivering the best experience for your participants.
Thank you. Great comments. Okay, let's go to idea number two. You can milk the novelty factor, and my goodness, people who know me know that I milk the novelty factor as much as I can, but make sure you nail the value proposition. So here's what I mean by that. So chatbots are still pretty new, and when people haven't experienced them in a learning environment and they experience them for the first time, you can hear a lot of things like, hey, that's really cool. So I've got a little graphic to show that. This is very cool and cutting edge, and that will be some great positive feedback for you to say, hey, we made a great decision putting in this chatbot. And so, however, the sort of shelf life of the benefit of the novelty factor will eventually fade. And so it's very important as you put together your chatbot project that you're creating an ROI calculation. And if you don't have the data for a pure ROI calculation, you're articulating very carefully what the actual value proposition is beyond that it's cool and cutting edge. And sometimes that is one of the value propositions I find where a company has sort of been stuck in the dark ages a little bit, and just getting something innovative launched and adopted is a big win in and of itself, just from a culture perspective. So yeah, I don't want to downplay that at all. That can be a huge factor. But things like converting, hey, this is cool and cutting edge, that good feeling, to something more substantial like, hey, this chatbot's valuable because it's increased learner engagement by 18%, or because now we've increased course completion by this percent. So always sort of figure out, when you're making the business argument for your chatbot, some quantitative and defensible qualitative value proposition points, and that's going to go a long way to continue to get support for your chatbot project. By the way, if anyone has questions on any of these, or comments or ideas, or even anecdotes, please share them in the chat. Idea number three, A/B testing gets 2 giggles with 1 tickle. Now, okay, I love this slide. Paul thought it was creepy. The background here is, the slide originally said A/B testing kills 2 birds with 1 stone, but I thought, that's a really morbid cliche in today's day and age. So I Googled what's an alternative to killing 2 birds with 1 stone, and I got, you get 2 giggles with 1 tickle. I think it's awesome. So here's what I mean by this. So let me show you an example of A/B testing. So take a look at this chatbot screen, where you might ask somebody a question like, on a scale of 1 to 7, How did you do with your goals this week? 1, terrible, 7, fantastic. A basic Likert scale question. So I might do an A/B test where I can send this message at 11 a.m. on a Friday and see what type of response rate I get. And or I could send it at 4 p.m. on a Friday and see what type of response rate I get. Your classic, simple A/B test. 11 a.m. versus 4 p.m. Great. So you can do this all day long with your chatbots, both with timing, like I'm showing you here. You can do this with verbiage, how it's worded. You can do it with frequency. You can, so there's all these different variables. You can try different messages and measure how well they do. So that's the classic benefit of an A/B test. And over time, you'll start developing a list of best practices for your organization, which will be super valuable for you, just not only within your chatbot project, but it's just really interesting data for your organization as a whole. So the second benefit that's a little bit hidden, but just as a software guy myself, I can't underscore this enough, is that it's super easy to do. If any of you have run like major multimedia projects, it's really hard to A/B test on like a rich video-based e-learning course, or rolling out a piece of software, with where everything has pixels on it. It gets very expensive and difficult to do. And a lot of times when you want to meaningfully A/B test with software, you have to like recompile the software and have people re-download or download and update. There's just a lot of friction points to doing A/B testing with traditional software. With a chatbot, you're just editing a conversation, you're just editing a message, or you're configuring something a little bit differently on the back end. So it becomes really exponentially easier to do A/B testing. And that's a huge value that you should articulate to all your stakeholders, to say, hey, one of the great virtues of a chatbot is that since it's a conversational user interface, we can do really great A/B testing. And by the way, the A/B testing really comes for free. And so you can really refine and get to a great chatbot experience through that iteration and A/B testing. So many software projects start out with the best intentions and fail with execution and user feedback, because it's just too expensive and clunky to improve the software based on user feedback. Not the case with the chatbot. So that's the 2 giggles with 1 tickle. All right, so idea number 4, user feedback with. So let's continue on the software theme. When you have all rolled out software-based projects, or if you're trying to do an evaluation on an e-learning course, or even a face-to-face training course, the feedback is always one where someone is sort of filling out a survey, right? User feedback with a chatbot's first person. User feedback is first-person feedback with a chatbot, so ask for it often. So that can look like something like this. Do you have a suggestion on how I can help you, speaking as the chatbot? How have I been helpful? Which of my messages have been most valuable, least valuable? So the type of feedback you can get from the chatbot can, so of course this is asking for qualitative feedback, but it's super meaningful. And the quality of the feedback will be different than filling out a Survey Monkey and say, hey, in a couple sentences, what did you like about this platform or about this user experience? Of course, that can be valuable. That's why we do assessments. But first person is, people can give direct feedback, and reading that feedback as the chatbot designer yourself will be extremely helpful for you. And you can do this frequently. You can do this a lot. And so with assessments, you're also limited by how frequently people are willing to fill out a survey. So with chatbots, you can ask for it all the time. So just to review that, user feedback is first-person feedback with a chatbot. So idea number 5, implement API-based conditions. So triggering message from other systems creates exponential value. All right, so a lot of times when I talk about APIs, it's more technical, so eyes start to glaze over. So hopefully I still have you, but basically what this means is that you can have some app or some system trigger a chatbot message. So let's say that I enroll for a course on my company's LMS. If the chatbot knows that I've done that, then it can trigger a message like, hey, Vince, I noticed you just enrolled for Safety 101. That's great. here are some tips for you on the course, or I'm so glad you did that. As a reminder, that is a required course. I'm glad you did it. Whatever your message is. So that's just one example of many of how you can use something happening in an app or some system to make the chatbot feel super personalized. The projects where I've seen where some meaningful work has been done with APIs just always consistently gets better user ratings because they just feel like the chatbot's much more helpful to them. So I'm going to pause here and see if Paul or Corey have other specific examples they can share where we're triggering messages based on something happening in another system.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of examples. One that is very simple but has gone a long way for us is just knowing the user's city and then pulling in the weather for that day from an external API. And so when the chatbot greets the person, it just greets them and says, "Hey, it's a hot day out there today," or "It's a cold day out there today." There's a question in the chat about feeling invasive. You do have to be aware of that. You don't want to feel too invasive with API connections, but little personalization things like that get attention. And then if you can follow up that attention with real value from the chatbot we were talking about earlier, emphasize the value, that can be a win for everybody. You can get attention with simple API calls and then follow it up with value with another API call or not, just with the chatbot design. And that can really drive engagement to new levels.
Mm-hmm. So third-party systems, of course, LMS, HRIS systems, even email, things like that you can use with APIs to trigger messages. Let's not get too much into this, but if you've got ideas on like, hey, we've got the system, how would it work with a chatbot? Please reach out to us. We'd be happy to brainstorm with you because it's actually not super hard to put together an API connection. And you really don't need even developers to do it. So that's something we'd be happy to brainstorm with you on. Speaking of APIs, we're now going to talk a little bit about XAPI. I was asking Paul and Corey earlier, just because of their age, if they've heard of the last mile term. The last mile term was coined, I think, in the 90s or maybe even the 80s. Maybe someone can correct me if they know. And it's this idea where when people were laying down cable and fiber across the country, it was relatively affordable to like bury cable under the ground from city to city. But the problem was the last mile. Like, okay, now how do we get that cable to 500 homes? That was called the last mile problem. And for XAPI, I see that we've had the promise of XAPI is incredible, where you can measure every activity or non-activity with a learner and have that data just really help you understand what's happening with the learner, much more than just what you get with an LMS. So it's a huge promise, but there's a similar last mile problem where how do you measure what's happening with the learner in the moment of learning? And that's where I think a chatbot can help solve the XAPI last mile problem. Here's a screenshot this is courtesy of Megan Torrance from Torrance Learning, by the way. Shout out to her, XAPI Masters over there at Torrance Learning. And this is a screenshot grabbed from the Kaltura media platform, which is XAPI, very XAPI friendly. So this is just a screenshot of a dashboard that she has for a particular learning cohort of getting all the data from this cohort in terms of what XAPIs be able to measure. So measuring who's engaged actors and who's clicking on what. Now, the copy is probably a little bit too small for you to read, but it shows who joined a particular URL, who joined the Slack group. But all of these measurements rely on the learner to engage with Slack or to engage with the e-learning course. But what about when they're in the flow of work? To have a chatbot right there, asking them questions, in terms of pull versus push, also them asking the chatbot questions. Now all of a sudden you can get that type of rich data through XAPI into your XAPI or your learning resource LRS. I think that there's just the sky's the limit in terms of untapping the real value behind XAPI. So that's all I'm going to say about that one. But if you have an LRS, if you have an XAPI strategy emerging within your organization, then definitely take a look at chatbots in terms of solving that last mile problem. Okay, do you have OCD? Are you a control freak? Do you feel the need to micromanage? Don't all say yes at once. Setting up real-time notifications with your chatbot will scratch that itch and more. So let me give you an example of this one. So here is an example of a notification that your chatbot can configure to do. So this is an example of an email that the chatbot is sending me. So here, dear Vince, I've been chatting, and I, meaning the chatbot, I've been chatting with Paul Bills, who's my direct report. He recently reported that he needs more support with an initiative XYZ. You may want to reach out and offer some help. Here's a link to the interaction we had. Click on this. I can go see the interaction that Paul had with the chatbot. So it's just giving me some notice about what's happening since the chatbot's having these daily interactions with all these learners. There's some inflection points in those conversations where it'd be really helpful for that learner if some human being would know about it, maybe a subject matter expert, maybe a coach, maybe a manager. So you can imagine identifying, hey, what parts of my chatbot conversation would be really helpful to understand and have human intervention. You start brainstorming that a little bit, you get a lot of cool ideas. And you can set up your chatbot to provide those notifications to some of those third-party or ancillary people who can come and help your learner out. Paul and Corey, any other examples on this one?
Yes. So Vince is touching on more where a person comes in and assists, where the chatbot passes a person off. But I've also seen notifications make a huge difference in reporting. So maybe you don't want to have someone step in and take over for the chatbot. You don't want someone to check in, give more support. If you care about getting your data, it can be incredibly useful to have the chatbot weekly say, hey, here's everything that's happening and here's a report. Or when a really important question comes up, right after someone answers, say, hey, here's all the information that you wanted to have. So it really brings that data to your fingertips.
Thanks, Corey.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that real quick. A lot of people are concerned when they're talking about chatbots that we're getting rid of the human element, or we're trying to replace people. And I actually don't see that as true at all. And the goal for me and most of my chatbot design is how can I make the limited human time that you have more meaningful? And this is one way that a chatbot absolutely delivers on that. If a chatbot can identify, warning signs, or identify disengagement, or identify, here's someone who could use some help, and we can tell a manager or a mentor or, someone, hey, this person needs help on this thing, please reach out. You're much more likely to have a meaningful conversation and to make a difference for that person. So I think this feature in particular shows how chatbots are helping people, not replacing people at all.
Thanks. Thank you. That's a great comment. Hey, we have 3 more design ideas to share. This next one, a little personalization goes a long way. So I've preached for years that the more personalized the chatbot feels, the more engaged, the more valuable the chatbot's going to feel to me as a user. Now, personalization can feel daunting in terms of authoring and writing that script. And so a little personalization can go a long way, where here's an example. Here's an example chatbot message. So I have modules that cover the following topics. Choose one that best fits your current situation: time management, listening skills, leading a group discussion. So if I get to choose what module that I'm going to be engaged with the chatbot in, it feels very personalized to me. This can be applied to things like the chatbot saying, hey, I can send you a module, or I can send you a message once a week or once a day. What learning style would you prefer? And again, if I get to make that choice, it feels a lot more personalized to me. And now you're not having to create 100 different tracks. You're just having to create 1 or 2 or 3 tracks. So things like this, by creating just a set number of buckets for number of tracks, where people can choose their track, will feel very personalized and will go a long way. So it's like a small baby step for personalization, but it will feel like a giant leap in terms of the benefit you're going to get from that. Okay, so moving to the next one, idea number 9. Scripts have a shelf life, so plan for keeping it fresh or keeping it correct. So when you design, particularly when you're designing push-based chatbots, you have to be mindful of, hey, when I'm sending a reminder, or if I'm sending like some content, training content, when will this message stop being correct, or when will it need to be updated? So so often when you're creating a chatbot project plan, you're just working on getting it to go live, but you do need to have part of that plan. Okay, how are we going to maintain it? How are we going to maintain the scripts, and how are we going to identify which ones need to be kept up and kept fresh? And so, that requires a little bit of project management, but it's important to do that, because if you have the chatbot, which is a new and innovative platform, ironically start giving old and outdated data, that's not going to go over so well. So, because scripts do have a shelf life, make a plan for keeping it up to date. So we're going to go to the last of the 10 ideas. So everybody needs a hype man, including your chatbot. And so what this means is that you need to do the work to promote your chatbot, because it's so new, to get the support, organizational support for it. A lot of times you get approval to try a chatbot, but once you get experience putting that together, you realize that for that chatbot to really deliver an ROI, you need many stakeholders involved with the content, and you need IT involved to facilitate the right channel and things like that. So make sure you're doing your best to promote the chatbot, share anecdotes, share the statistics and reports you're getting from the chatbot, describe the work that you went into it. A lot of it is evangelizing chatbots and helping people understand them. So some people will have unrealistic expectations when they hear about the chatbot. They'll start comparing it to Alexa or Google Assistant, and that's of course not what you're building. Those companies have thousands of developers working in those products, and maybe you're just building your chatbot on your own. So a lot of times you need the tools to be able to speak to people like, hey, don't ask my chatbot how many miles it is from here to Jupiter. That's not the goal of this chatbot. The goal of this chatbot is X, Y, and Z. And by the way, here's some evidence on why our chatbot's doing, adding some great benefit to our learners. So make sure that you do your job to promote and hype up your chatbot. If you've already done this, I'd love to hear in the chat ways that you have promoted your chatbot internally. What ways have you let people know about it? What ways are you getting feedback about your chatbot? What ways are you getting internal support for your chatbot? Now, there's a lot in there, so if you could just succinctly describe what you've done in the chat for others to read and to learn from, that would be fantastic. So those are the top, or the 10 design ideas for your chatbot. We're going to have a little group discussion. If you've got some questions or on any of the 10 design ideas, please put them in the chat as well. So here's the 2 plugs I was going to do, and this one will be really brief. If those of you that are unfamiliar with Mobile Coach, we are a chatbot authoring platform. You can author chatbots to do both pull and push with our platform. We support all these different chatbot channels that you see on the screen, and we're adding to them all the time. You can use our platform to design chatbots to teach, to remind, to answer questions. We've got a wonderful chatbot team to help you with your chatbot development, although you can do it on your own. If you haven't seen our platform in action, you can request a demo, go to mobilecoach.com, click on Get a Demo, and then we can arrange that for you. The other thing I wanted to show you is that we recently launched a new certification methodology. So clients can get a license to our platform so that you can author your own chatbot. And so typically in the past, that was actually a 2-day certification that we hosted in person. And with COVID, of course, that's no longer something that we do. But now we've created actually a blended certification process. So there's actually a series of videos that you watch, which is do-it-yourself, some tutorials on how to use our platform, and that's combined with some new documentation that we have, and then finally that's combined with some private instruction. And I have a slide on that I want to show you. So we are offering a webinar special today. So a new certification comes with a new beginning video tutorials followed by private sessions. After your training is done, you actually have a completed functional chatbot by the end of the training. Those of you familiar with this know that our pricing is $200 a month or $2,400 a year for an author license. For the webinar special, we're offering one free month. So if this is something you're interested in, you're thinking about, hey, I want to build a chatbot for my organization, either as a pilot or as part of a plan that you have, this might be a nice opportunity to try that out using our platform. If you're interested in this special, please email me, vince@mobilecoach.com. We'd be happy to get you set up and trained and on your way to developing your first chatbot. So with that, let's go to a group discussion if there's any questions that people have. Thank you all that have participated in the chat and have been watching. But we'll stay on for a few minutes if people have questions. Paul and Corey, have there been any questions in the chat that I've missed that we should discuss?
I don't think there's been any that we've missed, but maybe you want to speak more to that first question we got about are people concerned that a chatbot feels too invasive, or what if they don't have a company phone? I gave a little bit of an answer, but I'd love to hear more from you.
Yeah, boy, there's sort of two pieces in there. So the first piece is, what if people feel like the chatbot is too invasive? The goal, you have to really start with what's the goal of the chatbot. If the chatbot's to be, a common function of a chatbot is to be an accountability partner, and if you want your chatbot to be an accountability partner, there has to be a level of invasiveness to hold people accountable. So finding that right balance is really a design challenge. This is where A/B testing and getting feedback from users is super valuable. And the virtues of some of the things we've talked about today, where you can A/B test and you can adjust your design very easily to find that right balance. And so it would be wrong to say, hey, let's have it not be invasive at all, because then you might, that compromise might be too much and you might not get the efficacy of your chatbot. So finding that right balance, I think, requires some testing and some user feedback. And by the way, personalization also, because you can meet people where they are. You might have a chatbot say, hey, I can be your accountability coach, and I can follow up with you once a day or once a week or once every 2 weeks. What would you prefer? And that way you can create a couple different buckets where people can self-select into one where they feel the most comfortable. If people don't have company phones and you want to have a mobile-based channel, then your only choice is to have it be opt-in, where you promote the virtues of the chatbot to the learner and say, hey, this is something that you could opt into. You could, of course, opt out whenever you want if they're using their personal phones. Now that assumes that your company allows for personal phone use during work, and not all companies do, but many have, because in the work from home era, if I've got a personal phone, maybe I check my hours or go onto my intranet, look at policies on my personal device. And so oftentimes there are some work-related things that people are willing to do on their personal phones, and you just have to make your chatbot valuable enough where people are willing to use their personal phones to engage with it.
One really quick add. With most of these chatbot channels, we're also not telling people you need to download an additional app. We're not taking additional space off of their phone. This is a channel they already have. So like with SMS, that's an app that's native to my phone that I use every day, kind of like email. It's like adding my email account to my email app. So it often doesn't feel as invasive as you're thinking, just because it's not something new. This is something that people are used to doing, and it's a really common communication method.
Yeah. Great. See a question from Kai. Hey, Kai, great to have you on. Thank you. He's asking, does Mobile Coach handle other languages? Mobile Coach does handle other languages. Any language you can type in, you can author in using our platform. So yeah, great. You're good to go there. In terms of onboarding, chatbots are great for onboarding, because if you think about new hire onboarding, one of the biggest challenges is this sort of hooking up to a fire hose and trying to learn everything in a short amount of time. And not only like job function, but as a new hire, I'm trying to get acclimated to the culture, to what's appropriate, and I'm learning a bunch of new people, who's who. So you can have a chatbot first giving me sort of the orientation content and dripping it in a micro learning fashion versus a fire hose fashion. So that's one big benefit. You can have a new hire onboarding chatbot have pull functionality where I can look up contact names like, who's Paul and what's his job title and how long has he been here. Another really popular chatbot we've seen is an acronym bot. So as a new hire, so many organizations have like so many acronyms, and could be in a meeting like, what does that stand for? You don't want to, as a new hire, pause the meeting and maybe you could feel a little exposed to say, hey, I don't know what this means. So if I could just quickly ask a chatbot, what does MCP stand for, or some acronym? So there's new hire onboarding is a wonderful use case for chatbots. Any other questions folks have? So if you do have questions that you've thought of, please reach out to me, vince@mobilecoach.com. You'll also get a link to today's recording. I can't thank you enough for those of you that have joined today. Thank you so much, and hope to be in touch.